Hello and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio today, our friend Jean Fox. She is the project manager for South Coast Rail. I apologize to her because the last time she was in studio was in 2019, and when I emailed you to come on, it was like neither one of us realized it had been that long.
No.
And I know nothing has transpired from the last time we talked till being here.
Not a thing, Jim.
I know the mayor has talked about this, and the state reps come in every month and talk about this. I mean, there is, for lack of a better word, I think there is an excitement in some ways about seeing this finally come to fruition. It's been a long time coming.
It's been an enormously long haul. So
where do we stand right now?
Where do we stand? We reached the midpoint of construction last spring, but we finished the shorter line, the Fall River line. Substantial completion was October. So they're punch listing. They're doing a few fences and fixing some things while we're going full tilt boogie on the New Bedford line right now. Mm-hmm. So if people drive by Church Street or if they go by the New Bedford station site, they will see frenetic activity, to say the least. So the platforms are in. We have this fancy material called FRP, fiber reinforced polymer, which is much better than concrete, I'm told. So the concrete that you used to see on platforms is now FRP. Those are in. They're starting to really look like stations. They're going to have steel canopy, they're going to have EV charging, they're going to have the benches, the signage. In the coming months, people will see these stations really emerge as stations and not mud pits.
I know it's a projection, but I understand too that, I mean, everybody kind of talks about a late fall, early winter opening, if you will.
Right.
I don't know if that's a soft opening, hard opening, but that's sort of when they're sort of targeting it.
Correct.
Do we look like we're pretty close to that?
We look like we're really close to that. Certainly in terms of the construction. The construction has proceeded beautifully. The pandemic be damned. We were not halted by the pandemic. We did not suffer significant delays because of supply chain issues. We were able to advance this project in a timely manner and have stuck to all our major milestones, minor slippage. But this is a project of enormous magnitude. Mm-hmm. So I just put the caveat out there. If it slides a little bit, just be patient. It won't be the construction. It'll be, did we get all the signaling in right? Was the testing and commissioning flawless? In this day and age of derailments that we've seen this last week, our key focus is on making sure that this brand new line is safe. So they're going to have geo cars. If anyone heard the press conference this morning with General Manager Gulliver talking about all the stoppages up in Boston because of rail safety, what they do is they send these cars out to really calibrate the rail, and if there's an issue anywhere, they have to go fix it. And we don't want to be starting with a go fix it. We want to be starting with everything in place.
Do they have to, so are there new tracks physically?
Yes, all new rail, continuously welded rail. So what everyone used to hear when the freight trains would drive by, that clickety-clack, that goes away. It's smooth, it's quieter, and it allows for faster speeds.
As you and I were talking too, I mean, it's the 1950s since rail was here. I know trains have still come down because they were coming down to the waterfront to do freight, as you will. So there are the lines themselves. There's not just one line, right? I mean, freights will be
freight
one way.
Well, freight we're part of our project is to put sidings in near all the stations and things like that, so that if we have a commuter rail scheduled to come through, freight can pull over. Freight can operate on a different schedule. If they have to run at 10 o'clock at night, it's not a problem. The commuter rail has to run on the schedule it has because we only have so many slots up at South Station. So commuter rail will trump freight, but we have worked so well with our freight partners, Mass Coastal Railroad, and they have worked so well with us throughout this entire construction project. They are very comfortable with what we're setting up for sidings for them to pull over and park if there's commuter rail traffic.
You've been with this project, as you said to me, Governor Patrick appointed you. It's sort of late in the game question, but I don't mean it to be, because I think it's good to reemphasize. Why is this so important for this region?
Bottom line is we had a connection and we don't have it anymore, and we've suffered from that. We've suffered economically. We've suffered from the fact that Route 24 was built around the same time the expressway opened, and neither one of those has capacity for traffic anymore, which continues to increase. Isn't it easier to have a reliable schedule to get from point A to point B? If you're a student that's going to UMass Boston or any of the Boston schools or even Bridgewater, much easier and more reliable for you to get there by rail, and frankly safer. I see tremendous economic development potential by having a link. If you have a connection, it provides an opportunity for a business to say, okay, they're connected, we can get in and get out. And freight's a partner on that too. If some of those businesses are fish houses and they can move more by freight, they're going to do that. So it's going to help us. If you have economic development, what you get is a bigger tax base, takes the onus off the residential homeowner and distributes it more widely, and also allows you to have a greater tax base to do your own improvements in other areas.
Some of the state reps said the South Coast Rail really sort of accelerated, no pun intended, with Governor Baker.
Yes.
So obviously he understood, or in his mind, the value of having it was more important than not having it.
He certainly did. He certainly did. The Baker-Polito administration was spot on with their final conclusion, and that is that what we are building in Phase 1, what we call the Southern Triangle that goes from Middleborough, Taunton down to Fall River and New Bedford, is common to the preferred alternative, which would have gone through Stoughton. It allows us to build this now while we continue to chip away at Stoughton, as well as other potential routes throughout the Commonwealth. The governor saw that if we build this now, we're building 56% of the track miles we need for the Stoughton route, and we're making that connection much faster. So we could have gone through Stoughton, we could have gone through all the environmental variances, we could have gone through the cost prohibitiveness of it. We could have had further debate on electrification because we're not electrified statewide, and you don't want to be the only one that's operating with your own dedicated equipment, your own dedicated engineers, your own dedicated maintenance facility. That's what we have to look at as a state, and we are.
Do people, and you've been around for the good, bad, and the ugly with this whole process. I'm curious, are you still trying to, for lack of a better word, sell the project to people? I mean, are people still skeptical or not in favor of it?
Up to last year, when people were saying, why are they working on the railroad tracks?
Yeah.
There was skepticism up until that point. For now, I'm feeling a lot more excitement. They're seeing something really happen, $1 billion investment in our region from the state, no federal dollars here. This is a state investment in our region that we deserve. We have many people will tell you they feel that we've had short shrift for a long time, and we've been asking for a long time to help us get connected again. We don't want to be isolated. We have incredible amenities in this region that will bring people down here, bring tourist dollars in. In New Bedford is so well positioned for that, with the ferry service to the islands, with frankly some of the best restaurants in the world, little theater activity here. We've got a lot in New Bedford that people in Boston have no idea even exists. Even the cranberry bogs. I tell them about cranberry. You have cranberry? Yeah, we have cranberry bogs.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because as you and I were talking, I mean, it's interesting that since the South Coast Rail has become closer to almost reality, you see the communities. I grew up in Wareham.
Right.
Wareham wants commuter
They
rail.
want it.
And
Yes.
Buzzards Bay wants a
Yes,
stop down
they
there.
do.
So there's and they don't have it.
No, they
They have
don't.
the Cape Flyer, but
That's seasonal and sporadic.
correct.
Yep.
So it seems as though other parts of the state that haven't had it are saying, why not us too?
That's right. So Western Mass is a prime example of that. If you are at, say, Westfield State in Western Mass, getting back to this area is a very long bus trip into Boston, and then another ride down here, where if you could have that east-west rail connection, it would be much easier for a student, say, who wanted to be in the western part of the state, and alternatively for residents of the western part of the state to access what we have in the eastern part of the state.
Right. I know that, talk about the two stations here in New Bedford that are still being constructed.
But they look so much better. I drove by Church Street this morning and I was so impressed. So we have Church Street, which is our North New Bedford station, our North End station. I can't remember exactly how many parking places. I think it's around 350. It's a typical side platform station. It's an 800-foot long platform. It has the parking, the electric vehicle charging stations, a bike shelter, the signage. I mean, it's nothing fancy. This is not South Station.
Right.
These are commuter rail stations. They're basic. They're platforms and parking. And both the New Bedford downtown station and the Church Street station have pretty much the same amenities. So they'll be very well lit. They will have many cameras. We are very concerned about safety and security, and we're going to be focusing heavily on that going forward in many ways. I have a big safety program I'm actually launching, but the stations are going to be easily accessible to people. I can't tell you what they're going to cost at this point. That's not on South Coast Rail to predict. That's on the MBTA in general to do, but they'll provide a convenient way to get into and out of the city. In addition, there will be a pedestrian bridge over by the New Bedford station.
Which has been approved.
Has been approved, and if you
Not too
go
long ago, the city council did.
Yes, they approved the agreement for that bridge, which we worked really long and hard with the city on in terms of its design. It's a tied arch, really fancy, pretty bridge. It's going to be not an eyesore, as so many pedestrian bridges tend to be. It's going to be it's 10 feet wide. We are going to tell people you don't ride your bicycle across this bridge, you walk it. But, you know, it's for pedestrians and bikers and strollers, and it's going to provide ready access from Purchase Street to the platform without taking your life in your hands crossing Route 18.
I think, too, the perception is a little different because, as you're saying, the stations are not South Station.
No,
I think
they're not.
People have a perception, oh, I need to go buy my ticket and I need to go. But that's really not how it works anymore.
No, there's going to be places where you can buy your electronic ticket at the station. They're actually redoing that whole system right now. So we've got the infrastructure there. There's apps on your phone you can use, very easy to find. Just Google MBTA and you'll find them. In fact, I was really embarrassed because I was at a meeting last week and somebody showed me reliability. There's a whole reliability app. You can find out what the trains are running.
Oh,
so
wow.
Middleborough Lakeville was at 99.9% on time for that week. That's good to know. But yes, you'll do all your parking, all your fares can be done electronically or at the actual stations. You don't have to go buy a ticket and wait in line.
Exactly. Yeah. The trains themselves. I mean, you were talking about electric trains, and I mean these are different trains, as you were kind of alluding to earlier in the program, than what again people might be expected. Do we have the trains?
We do. We have a couple of locomotives dedicated just to us. We'll be using the equipment that is already used on the Middleborough line. We have secured 16 new bi-level coaches to accommodate additional ridership because we're basically adding on to an existing service, bringing another 1,600 people onto what, I mean, a lot of people from New Bedford used to drive up to Lakeville to get on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But the bi-level coaches should help with the ridership. Actually, the T ordered, I think, 80, and 16, the first 16 were for South Coast Rail, and they're all here.
My understanding, I mean, ultimately the trip is about an hour and a half.
Hour and a half, yep.
Which, if you're driving up there this time,
oh, it's a piece of cake.
Could be a lot more.
I did it yesterday, Jim. It wasn't fun.
And it goes to South Station too, right?
It goes to South Station.
Ultimately.
Yes, that's the final stop. But again, you know, if you want to go, you can make all your subway connections easily there. If you want to go over to the Longwood Medical Plaza, which is Medical Mecca, they've got the university system there. So there's a lot of accessibility. Once you get into South Station, you're there. It's beautiful.
I know one of the things too that was in the news that you were involved with or talking about is the noise mitigation too.
Yes.
With houses, families along the route.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So we had to do, as part of our environmental review process and submission, an analysis of impacts to residential dwellings only, that along the right-of-way. And that analysis consisted of a bunch of variables, including the basic topography of the area, the distance from the tracks, ambient noise. So, for example, if you already have active freight behind your house, you have ambient noise. You have it.
If you're more ambient noise than you think you do.
Than you think you do.
Yeah.
And if you're in an area like Church Street, probably sees a lot of emergency vehicle traffic. So there would be ambient noise there. So those are the things that are looked at. And it's severe impacts, just as we did on the Green Line extension recently, and just as what's done pretty much nationwide. So FTA has that series of guidelines we had to follow when we conducted the analysis, and we identified a number of residences that met the criteria. And when they do meet the criteria, they are notified, sometimes multiple times, because sometimes we get mail and we just say no, and we throw it away. And they're notified, and the final notification, if they don't respond, is a door hanger. And it allows them anywhere from around 5,000 for very minor impacts to around 30,000 for more significant impacts. And it's things like track-facing window replacement or doors, mini splits in the house to help mitigate for the noise. Sometimes people opt for, I don't really want new windows and doors. I did them 15 years ago. They're fine. But I want the visual barrier. Give me some greenery here.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of people are going for, well, that doesn't necessarily mitigate for noise with any major, by any major margin. The visual is awesome, also what they'd like to see. So that program is actually, we're in the last, we've done 4 groups. The last group went out in October, and it's moving along. We've got overall about 75 to 80% participation.
That's crazy when you think about it, too.
It is.
Because just the miles of the route, there's probably quite a few properties that are impacted.
Yeah, most were in Fall River, actually.
Really?
Yes, they have a lot of multifamily residences right on the tracks.
Wow.
Yeah, not to say there weren't any here. There were 33 in my town, in Freetown.
Yeah.
So, but only 9 in Lakeville, for example.
How many stops do you think? How many stops will there be?
Well, the same ones that already exist on the
Lakeville Road.
Yes, and then we're adding. So if you're coming out of New Bedford, you're going to go New Bedford Church, then you'll go up to the new Middleborough station.
I'm trying to picture how it works because obviously I know where I don't know where the tracks are. I guess that's the thing.
Well, that's it. It's a slight shift. So we couldn't use the existing Lakeville station for phase 1 without doing a reverse move in Lakeville. So we would have gotten the train up, but would have had to back up to get on the right set of tracks.
Right.
That's 15 minutes plus a brake check, plus an engineer has to get out and walk back and forth to make sure everything's fine, which is the right thing to do, but it adds to a trip that's already an hour and a half long.
Right. One of the things too is I think people need to know too. You're talking 3 trains in the morning peak, and
3 in the PM
3 in
peak,
the PM
and
peak.
1 or 2 during the day. That's still TBD, as they say. We'll see.
Will there be? So what times are you thinking? 6 a.m.
Well, I think the first one may even be a little bit before that. We, what they call out of Boston, they call the earlier ones the nurses' trains, because they have to be on the floor at 7 a.m.
Right.
in some of the Boston hospitals. So they'll, you could see one at 5:30. So that's also still under study. We actually recently had a meeting on that. We're taking that existing service, and ours has to all fit into that. So I think we could see one 5, and I think we could see one, well, you will see one later for those of us that don't want to be in before 9.
Right. Well, no, it's just interesting too because, there's, especially on the way back.
Right.
Right. People, if you're in Boston, chances are it's not necessarily 9 to 5.
No, not anymore.
So, you could be getting out at, I'm just throwing a timeout, 7.
You could, and you want to make sure you can get back.
Exactly.
Right. It's the same thing with the current bus service.
Exactly.
So if you miss that 5:30, you're not catching anything for a couple of hours. So we'll have to be looking at all of that, and that's part of what, when you do a launch, you see, are you getting the people on the train that need to be?
It's curious too, because it's taken so long, but how quickly it has gone in the last couple of years. It is really, the whole process has really sped up. So your communications or public hearings or whatever, those are probably coming down to I don't want to say minimum, not that you wouldn't have them, but
right. No, the getting the information out piece was a heavy lift. People were skeptical, as you earlier pointed out, and then there were concerns. What does this mean for me and my property and all that? So you want to be able to answer those. And certainly, I've worked with the chambers of commerce. And now we have the one chamber.
Right.
I've worked with the universities and the community colleges, but also neighborhood groups. I've talked to neighborhood groups. What are your concerns? So if you go to Church Street, for example, they don't want people who are taking the train to park in their street. They want their street parking.
Exactly, yeah.
So thankfully, the city council's paying attention to all of this. Because it happens. It happened in Canton. They started saying, we want to save ourselves a couple of bucks. We're going to park in front of so-and-so's house.
Right.
That's not right. So the city council is definitely aware of that, and we'll work with the neighborhood on that. And we are trying to make our stations as convenient and accessible as we can. We want to make sure we have enough spaces, and we're looking at all of that, and I think we do. But I mean, Lakeville opened up and immediately was overcrowded. So
well, I can remember when it first opened, and if you didn't get there at a certain time,
you weren't getting there.
There was no parking spot.
That's right. That's right. And they had to immediately expand.
I don't know if it's still like that now, but
no, because they have over 700 spots there now in Lakeville, and but it gets very full.
Yeah.
It's for everybody who's in southeastern Mass. That's the first station.
Right.
So everyone would go up there. We did license plate checks back in the day, and we'd go check where people were from.
Oh, wow.
And there were not that many from Lakeville.
No, that'd be the whole town at that point,
that's
but
right.
everybody's leaving for the day.
Yeah, that's right, the whole town's evacuated. No, they were from southeastern Mass.
The one thing I hear from people, too, is that they do like the train. It
Sure.
seems more comfortable, if that's the right way of putting it.
Has a bathroom and everything.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. The train has Wi-Fi. The train has quiet cars, so nobody can be on a cell phone. The train is relaxing, so some people like to get on the train and go to sleep if it's an early ride in and they've got a full day in front of them. It just takes that level of stress that we get when we're in our cars on Route 24, even on 140 anymore. It's all difficult, and our roadways are, like I said earlier, they're over capacity. I'd rather have a seat, and thankfully, if I'm getting on a train in New Bedford, I'm going to have a seat.
Exactly,
not a
yeah.
problem, and get in there, and I know I'm going to get in there pretty much on time unless there's some major fiasco, and that happens too.
Talk to me, because one of the issues that has been going on, and I'm just generalizing here, but the MBTA has certainly been under a ton of scrutiny.
Yes.
Safety of trains. I mean, we saw the fire and people breaking
The
the
Orange
window.
Line,
The
yes.
Orange Line. They had lines shut down for months. I think the Red Line
the
was
red
one.
Line, yes, they had to shut because they were doing. So you're right.
So how comfortable? And obviously, it's a two-way street. You have to work with the MBTA with this. But how comfortable is everybody right now with the direction that the MBTA is going? And obviously, we have a new governor in Governor Healy. So
and we have renewed interest in making sure that we build and maintain safe service. So what we have in our service here is all brand new.
yeah.
And it is going to be scrutinized ad nauseum ad infinitum, as they say. We are going to be extremely careful when we do our testing and commissioning that everything is spit spot and ready to go and as safe as can be. The subway system, I think everybody knows, is so old. The equipment on it is antiquated. They finally got the new Orange Line cars on. The Red Line cars still haven't happened, but they will.
And that's a good distinction you're making too. There's a difference between
Subway
the
and commuter
subway
rail,
and
very
commuter
different.
rail. Yes.
Yes, and the subway. So the subway has the third rail electrification. It has some above ground, some below ground. We are on the ground with our continuously welded rail. We're going to be inspected and maintained with great scrutiny. And there's a whole new approach. I think it's a whole new era at the MBTA, and Governor Healy's definitely behind this. We need to focus on safety overall, everywhere in the Commonwealth for people on public transit. And that includes your buses, too.
Well, it's, and I think she made the point, I'm paraphrasing, that, Boston doesn't work or the state doesn't work if transportation doesn't work.
You can't get there. That's right. She's absolutely right. And so what they did, the fiasco today, it happened last night where they slowed everything down on all the subway lines, was to be careful. They had gotten some geocar reports in that said, the track doesn't look good in these areas, so let's slow everything down while we vet this and figure it out. And that's because we've had some pretty hairy incidents in the last couple of years especially, but actually dating back to Snowmageddon, because I was one of those stranded people in 2015.
No, it's been, and the MBTA, fair or not, has been certainly criticized, and there are a lot of good people that work for the team that are trying their best, but I mean, and we've talked about, some of this stuff is old.
The stuff is really old, and when you do anything, you have to have a good maintenance plan. And that's one of the things that with South Coast Rail and with our friends at Railroad Operations, we're really looking at. How is the maintenance of this going to be ongoing and continuous? Because you can't just build something and walk away from it. We all know that when you build a new building, you have to have a maintenance plan. The same goes true for transportation.
And you were touching on that, and that the city is poised with the airport. I know they're looking at a new terminal in the waterfront with Marine Terminal and all these things. New Bedford is poised, this area is poised for transportation, but the maintenance has got to be
at the top of the list.
You got to have the money to.
Well, I think you're going to see major investments in the MBTA, because this maintenance overall on the MBTA side of the house was given short shrift for a long time, and not for lack of trying. This GM is wonderful and an advocate. Steve Poftak before him was, and even before the ones before, they would all say, you know, we really have to pick up the maintenance, and it just never made it to the top of the list. But there's now, unfortunately, it took some unfortunate incidents to bring attention to it, but the reality is with anything you build, you have to build in a maintenance plan, and that's certainly a big part of this.
You've got a lot on your plate with this. I mean, is there anything that you're looking at right now that surprises you, or you didn't expect that's got to be tweaked or whatever before this gets going officially?
You know what my big fear is? I have to be very honest with you, Jim. My big fear is that for our region, the trains have had very little traffic, and what traffic there was at 10 miles an hour. So people view the tracks as a playground.
Oh, I haven't thought,
They recreate on them, they camp out on them, they take their ATVs on them, they throw stuff on them. And if I can deliver a message, I think we're going to have a wonderful service here we've worked hard to get and we deserve. But we need to understand that the railroad tracks are not a place to play. It's dangerous. I've developed a series of videos I'm going to be circulating. They're age appropriate, plus a general public one, just to remind people that trespassing on the right-of-way is a very dangerous thing. You can't tell which direction the train's coming from. They're push-pull locomotives, so you don't know. That locomotive could be at the end pushing the cars, or it could be at the other end pulling the cars, so you can't tell direction. And they're not coming at 10 miles an hour, it's going clickety-clack.
Right.
They're going to be in some areas 80 miles an hour.
Wow.
So yeah, it's very different, and for us it's a learning experience. My goal around all this, and I didn't plan on this being an issue. I planned on, let us build this thing, we need this, we deserve it, but I'm really concerned that I need to get the message out on safety.
Got about 30 seconds left. What's coming up?
Coming up, a lot more track work this summer. Going to see a lot more track work going in, so don't be upset when you see trucks with big pieces, strings of track coming, and continuing working on the stations.
Meetings or anything coming up?
Nothing yet, but I'm likely to have more as we get into the spring and summer.
We'll see you then.
Excellent.
It's great seeing you, and I
Same,
apologize
Jim.
for not doing this, but it's great seeing you, and hopefully before this does officially open, we can get you on again one last time.
I would love it. I would love it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Jean Fox, our guest. My thanks to her for coming in. That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall, the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.